Good morning, everyone. My name is Lotus Liu, and I'm the PR Director for the California Association of Realtors. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for our virtual press conference calling for critical additional budget investments to address the state's severe housing crisis and help close the racial gap in homeownership. Today, you'll hear from my colleagues at the California Association of Realtors, as well as Habitat for Humanity California and the California Building Industry Association. We'll start with some brief remarks and close with an opportunity for reporters to ask questions. First, I'll introduce Dave Walsh from C.A.R.
Good, thank you, Lotus. And thank you everyone for being here this morning. I'd like to start by just saying that this is a challenging time in California. So my name is, again, as Lotus said, Dave Walsh. I'm the president of the California Association of Realtors. And I want to start with a startling number, $813,980. That's $813,980. And that's the median home price here in California. The state set that record just last month. And we're on track for the once unthinkable, a median home price of over $1 million. Think about that. $1 million just to buy the median home in our state. That puts homeownership out of reach for millions of Californians. In fact, now only 1 in 4 Californians can afford to buy a home as it currently stands. And even fewer Black and Latinx Californians can afford the median priced home. This is inexcusable. California has a housing crisis. There's not nearly enough housing supply to keep up the growing and ever-present demand. We hear it in every single day from our membership and more than 200,000 realtors in every corner of the state. They say the same thing that we heard from Governor Gavin Newsom last week. We need more damn housing. We need more damn housing. We need to be building more housing in the state and fast. We could not agree more with the governor's ambitious call for 3.5 million new housing units. But there has been little progress in making this dream a reality. For working Californians to achieve the true security to keep up economic inequality from getting worse, we must increase opportunities for Californians to buy their homes. We're urging our leaders to take immediate action through the state budget process to address inequities in homeownership and increase the supply of housing at all levels of affordability. Of the $9.3 billion allocated to housing in this budget, only $725 million goes directly towards expanding homeownership opportunities. We can do better. We must do better. We can advance critically needed new housing in California through smart budget investments. The state's record budget surplus creates a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to significantly put a dent in our state's housing shortage. We're asking the legislature to complement federal efforts from the Biden administration to incentivize local governments to plan for more housing. We're also urging investment in a tax credit for first-time low and moderate income home buyers to help California's working families purchase our homes. Our state should also work towards creating parity in state funding programs so that housing for homeownership is given equal consideration. California needs to come together to prioritize more housing. It's the right thing to do to ensure the American dream of homeownership doesn't slip away for Californians who love our golden state. This is about equal opportunity for all, regardless of where you live, your ethnicity, or your socioeconomic status. Thank you so much. Now I'll turn it over to Maureen with Habitat for Humanity California. Maureen, please.
Thank you, Dave. Good morning, everyone. My name is Maureen Sedonen, and I'm the chair of the board of directors of Habitat for Humanity California and the CEO of Habitat for Humanity Greater San Francisco. Habitat is working every day to close the housing and wealth gap in California through affordable home ownership and home preservation. Habitat affiliates bring people together to build homes, community, and hope. Habitat California advocates for affordable housing with specific focus on homeownership opportunities for families with limited incomes. As the housing crisis in California worsens, and as every county in our state faces a housing shortage, affordable ownership solutions are essential to increasing housing supply, wealth, and equity. Over 81% of the Habitat families across California are from communities of color. This past year, more than ever, we've seen how the stability of a home and affordable mortgage made to our Habitat homeowners and made them more resilient during this pandemic. They were no longer in overcrowded conditions, paying over 50% of their income on housing. Habitat California's vision is a world where everyone has a decent place to live, which is currently not the case for many Californians. Too many Californians, including families with children, are one paycheck away from homelessness. We need to be working to create an ecosystem of housing opportunities, including an investment in affordable home ownership for all income levels. California needs a housing ladder. This means building housing at all levels and all types of housing. This means homeless housing. This means affordable rental. And this also means affordable homes for purchase to make people first-time homeowners. Without ownership housing, without the ability to purchase a home, the ownership and wealth gap for Black and Latinx households will persist and continue to grow. Governor Newsom's May revise invested $12 billion in homelessness. And we need to look at the entire housing continuum to comprehensively address the housing crisis. In addition to the budget investments Dave mentioned, we're calling for 20% of this $12 billion to be set aside for ownership development of housing. We must increase the supply to solve this crisis and to close the racial homeownership gap and the wealth gap that we experience. We have a production problem. Low-income folks who are qualifying for loans don't have the supply of homes to buy. We would love to see the matriculation and stability of these families moving from insecurity and instability that they're often experiencing to becoming longtime homeownership owners and building equity and stability for them and for their children. Habitat affiliates across California have a huge pipeline of affordable home developments that are shovel ready and ready to go, waiting for the state's investment. We have many homes that we need to build across every county in California. This is about the future of our state. This is about keeping more Californians from living on the edge and falling into homelessness. This is about our friends, our families, our neighbors, and our community. I want to thank you today and introduce you to Michael Gunning from the California Building Industry Association. Michael?
Awesome. Thanks, Maureen. As you said, I'm Michael Gunning, and I am with the California Building Industry Association, and we represent the home builders across the state. You know, California's housing crisis is not complicated. It's simply supply and demand. Kind of reminds me of my old days from Econ 101 at CMC. More supply reduces costs. There's just not enough housing supply to accommodate the demand. The solution is just as simple. California needs more homes to meet this demand, and we must ensure that our approach to new housing is equitable across all racial lines. The data is clear. We need to produce 180,000 units of housing each year to keep up with this demand. But production, unfortunately, has only been about 80,000 new homes annually over the past decade. In fact, production has gone down the past 3 years and continues to fall beneath the projections we need. As you heard from Dave, median home prices in California exceed $813,000. Middle-class families, who are primarily families of color, are being priced out of this market. We need to build housing for all that can be purchased by people at all income levels. You know, both of my parents immigrated to the United States from Jamaica. They came here in the 50s, settling in California, Los Angeles in 1957. My mom was a school teacher. My dad was a civil engineer. They were able to save their money and buy a house. Additionally, they were able to save money and buy an apartment building, which ultimately became the foundation for my brother and I to go to college. We need to create this similar housing ladder for all people in California. We need to create this opportunity, the same opportunity, so all people, regardless of where they are in life, to build wealth and make the best possible life for themselves and their families. We need low-income housing, we need starter housing, we need move-up housing, all of this so families can grow. We need housing for all. We're calling today on the legislature to take action to reduce these barriers to housing construction and ensure that all Californians can build the homes needed to achieve housing for all. It is May revised. The governor understood this, and we certainly appreciate his call and budget direction for more housing. We could not agree more with this focus. But honestly, since we all heard that first goal in 2018 of 3.5 million units, there's been little progress in reaching that goal. California has to cut down the barriers to housing construction. You know, let's be smart about this. Our state leaders should invest in matching grants, tax credits. Let's complement those ideas and programs coming out of the Biden administration. These grants can help local governments plan and implement housing programs. You know, also provide tax credits to developers constructing affordable units. California must not limit its tax credit programs to only rental housing. We've got to figure out how to ensure that we equally encourage construction for owner-occupied units as well. You know, I'll share another concept of, we certainly know a lot of money's coming into the state from the federal and the surplus. What about a consideration of an impact fee moratorium? You know, given the amount of federal monies going to local jurisdictions, why don't we pause on fees just to do something to jumpstart production? Just a concept. Rental housing opportunities are critical. It means a roof over your head, a place to call home, but we cannot focus, as I've said, all of our resources on rental opportunities. If we're really going to help working Californians, including those from traditionally financially disadvantaged neighborhoods, if we're going to help them buy homes and close the wealth gap, home ownership builds a better life, and it does close the wealth gap. Finally, you know, I was a history major, and it's critical, as you all know, to understanding your past so you can determine the future. That's why the three organizations you're hearing from today have recently come together to provide every member of the legislature and each of the constitutional officers with a copy of Richard Rothstein's Color of Law. If you've not read this, I encourage you to, because Rothstein's book, it really details how historic and current segregation in America is frankly a byproduct of government policies at the local, state, and federal levels that unfairly prevented Black families in specific and other people of color from becoming homeowners and blocked their ability to build this generational wealth we've been talking about. We want to see this concerted action in Sacramento to address these painful truths about our housing policy past. If California plans to create housing policy that for the future that works for everyone, we have to have these kind of discussions and appreciate this past. We here at CBIA are very committed to the solution, to all these solutions, to building more housing, promoting equity, and providing opportunity for all Californians to own a home and all the benefits that come with it. With that, thank you. And I'd like to introduce our next speaker, the man with the numbers, who's going to show it all, Oscar Way. Oscar, it's all yours, friend.
Thank you, Michael, for introducing me. And Again, my name is Oscar Way. I'm the Deputy Chief Economist for the California Association of Realtors. The state budget has created a historic and urgent need for actions to address the state's severe gap in homeownership. Now, like what Michael said, I'm going to show you some numbers. I'm going to show you a slide in the next few minutes. And some of you may have seen some of my slides, but I'm going to show you some slides that demonstrate, how the housing supply issue, what housing supply issue we have in California and how that impacts home ownership, and how that might have created a racial gap between between ethnic groups on home ownership, as well as the gap and wealth gap in between ethnic group. So let's take a quick look at some of the numbers that some of our speakers mentioned earlier. Yes, we have been definitely building less than the state, what the state need for the last 15, 20 years. You can take a look at the slide here. The orange line shows you how many housing that we need every single year. And the blue bar shows you how many we have been building. And obviously there has been some gaps in the last 15 years. And because of this imbalance between supply and demand, market competition has been building up. And what market competition has been doing to the market is it has been actually putting upward pressure on home prices. And as Dave and Michael mentioned earlier about the record-setting price, we did set a record price over 800,000 in April. That number could go a little bit higher, in the upcoming months or so. But that statewide median price, that statewide record price, is not just a state number. If you look across, the state, there are record prices in California at the county level, at the city level, and at some of the local level as well. That created a lot of affordability issues across the state, all over California. Now, this problem is, if you take a look at the housing affordability number that we typically look at, only about 27% can afford to buy a median price home. If you flip it around, that means close to about 3/4 of the people in California cannot buy a median price home. That problem is even more severe for communities of color. If you look at the Black families, only 19% at the end of 2020 can afford to buy a median price home. And for Latinx family, only 20%. That's way below that 27% that we mentioned earlier. What is the problem? The problem, as we mentioned earlier, the lack of supply, which you push home prices up to a very high level, is the issue. If you look at the income required to buy a median price home, close to $150,000. If you compare that to the median household income for a Latinx family and a Black family, it's a significant difference. This created a huge disparity, created a problem for people to achieve home ownership. Many families across the state find it very, very difficult to make home buying a reality. And that's the reason why we have low home ownership in California. For the state as a whole, it is currently at 55% in 2019, and that's the second lowest among all the states in the US. But if you take a look at Black families and Latinx families, the numbers are even lower, 37% and 44%. There has been a consistent gap in the last 15 years or so because of the affordability issue that creates a home ownership issue. Now, home ownership is, as we all know, a way to build wealth. That's a very effective way of building wealth. You look at, the comparison between the net worth of a household with a home versus a renter household. There's a big difference, almost 250,000 difference in 2019. That's why we said, home ownership is an effective way of building wealth. If we have low home ownership, and if you are taking away, the ability to buy a home for many middle income families, many families of communities of colors, that means you're taking away their ability to accumulate wealth. In order to narrow the gap of wealth, to help achieve the wealth equity goal, we need to have the ability to have people to have the ability to buy a home. Homeownership is just the key to building generational wealth and helps to stabilize communities. Now, this is about more than just housing. It is about equity and access to homeownership for all Californians. The state desperately needs more housing, especially for diverse middle class and low income Californians. With our state historic budget surplus, there has never been a better opportunity to begin to seriously address the racial gap in homeownership and California's severe housing shortage. We know the way to solve the crisis, and that is to build more homes so that all Californians have a place here. Thank you for your time, and now I'll turn it over to Lotus.
Thank you, Oscar, for putting some numbers behind the housing crisis here in California. And thanks to all our speakers here today. Now, I'm happy to open it up to questions from the reporters in attendance. Just use the raise your hand button available on the Zoom screen below, and we'll call on you. We'll unmute your mic, and you can introduce yourself and your outlet and your question. We do have some questions that have been typed in the chat already, so I'll go ahead and pose those questions. This is from Jeff Collins of the Orange County Register. Jeff's question is, do you support any programs that specifically target minority residents for home ownership? And if so, what are they?
So Lotus, I'll take it from the Habitat perspective, and maybe some of my colleagues also comment. But what I would say is we do a lot of geo-targeting at Habitat. Because we are using a fair housing lottery, we cannot pre-select our homeowners, but we qualify people based on their income, which in our case is the 50 to 80% area median income. And then we geo-target neighborhoods through community partnerships, through faith-based organizations, and through other networks that we have to encourage a lot of applications from these communities. And that's why we've been able to have such double the number of people of color in the Habitat networks. And we're very proud of that. We have incredible community partners. We're very blessed to have them. And we do a lot of outreach to get families ready to make sure their credit's in good shape so they can apply and have a higher probability of being successful in that lottery.
Can I also tag in? Thank you, Maureen. That was excellent. Can I also tag in? We in the real estate side of things, in the California Association of Realtors, have been speaking at the federal level about financing, because there's really two sides to this equation. It's not only the supply, but it's the qualifications that are necessary to help people of color obtain financing. And we know historically, as Michael pointed out in the wonderful book Color of Law, there's lots of reasons that people of color have been barred from housing over a long period of time, which has made it so that it's harder for them to get credit, made it so it's harder for them to build wealth, et cetera. And because of that, lending to people of color has been, unfortunately, also resulted in higher costs and higher qualifications. So when you think about the big picture of housing in California and the financing that's necessary to acquire that $813,000 median sales price, the truth is that when you start adding additional costs to obtain financing and additional credit requirements to obtain financing, that even pushes the people of color farther to the side or marginalizes them even further. So we in the California Association of Realtors have been talking to the federal, our elected officials at the federal level to work with government financing programs to bring those more back in line with what it ought to be and decrease the costs for people of color for getting financing and not penalize them because of credit scores or unfairly penalize them because they don't necessarily have history in home ownership.
Great, thank you, Dave. Let's see. I think Alexei has a question. Alexei from the San Francisco Chronicle.
Hey there. Yes, it's Alexei from the Chronicle. I heard a couple things that sounded like specific budget asks. One was potentially expanding the availability of tax credits to builders who build single-family homes. Another was a moratorium on impact fees. Are these formal asks that you've made to either the legislature or the governor? And are there other things that you are specifically seeking in the budget that you think would help address with either getting more homes built faster or helping people afford to buy the homes that are available? Thanks.
Why don't I take a stab at that, crew? Lexi, Michael Gunning here with the California Building Industry Association. I think it's twofold. I think today's really about acknowledging that we spend a lot of money on rental and not a lot on ownership. So to me, that's the first thing. No, we don't have a specific concept for a impact fee moratorium, but the thinking is let's think about it, right? I think what you see today is a group of interested participants who want to increase home ownership, and we frankly want to have the legislature and the governor appreciate the dynamics that have impacted communities of color and Black and brown people in this state, and let's try to fix that and change the path. So new concepts, but we certainly plan to share with the legislature going forward.
And if I might, Lexi, this is Maureen Sedonen from Habitat California. And I think on our we would like to say too that we would like to see 20% of all affordable housing money be put to ownership programs. We have been fighting for years to try to get the resources made available to build the homes that we have ready to be built. And without this policy change, without a mindset shift, without people being bold and saying, if you want to move the needle on homeownership for Black and brown and other people of color in our communities, and you really want to help people build wealth and build a better impact for their families and the educational outcomes of their children, you have to shift the money. And in the case of what we're doing at Habitat, we're leveraging this money 5-to-1, 7-to-1, depending on the community. So we're bringing all kinds of resources with every public dollar that comes forward to help us build affordable home ownership. So we would love to see the legislature, the governor, our local cities and municipalities join with us and shift these dollars and help us build these homes that we're ready to build.
All right, great. Thanks, Maureen. Here's a question from Regina Wilson of the California Black Media, and this might be from Michael. She's asking, why is there a production problem? Is it labor, land materials? And what are the top 3 policies creating the barriers?
Boy, Regina, great questions. All of the above. How about that? I think all of us recognize that the cost of housing is going up. We know lumber now adds $25,000 plus to the cost of a home. Concrete as well. Access to concrete is increasing costs. People rehabbing while they're on pandemic at home. All of these things have added to the cost. No question about it. I think similar to Alexi's question, Regina, what we're trying to do is begin the conversation and try to educate the legislature to appreciate these dynamics and come up with solutions that do answer these questions. So I hope that gets at it a little bit.
Thanks, Michael. And she's got a couple of others. I'll go through one more before we go to someone else first. She's also asking, how much impact is from foreign investors and pension funds buying the homes and driving up the home values? That might be an Oscar question.
Yeah, I will take a stab at that. A very good question. Foreign investors and pension fund investors, I think, depending on which period of time you're looking at. Now, in the 2011, 2012, when we have home prices at a very low level, there were a lot of investors, very interested in the California housing market, and they poured their money in and they actually pushed up home prices. There's no doubt about it. But at the same time, when the economy started improving after the great recessions in 2009, 2010, when the economy started improving, people started getting back on track, and they started, thinking, okay, well, we are financially capable of buying it now, and let's face it, California is a great place to live. A lot of people, when they're financially capable of doing so, they want to buy a home, and as such, the economy improves. people started thinking about buying a home, and they started, the housing demand continued to improve. And when demand continued to improve, home prices started rising because of domestic domestic demand continued to rise. You see home prices start increasing. The bottom line is still the same. If you look at that same chart that I showed earlier, we haven't been building enough. And that's the reason why, home prices continue to increase. Currently, the last couple of years, last 3-4 years, foreign investors and pension fund investors haven't been playing a very big role in pushing up home prices. I'm not saying that there's no role at all, but I think it's just people buying primary homes, just the housing demand in California, and just not having enough supply is the major problem for why we're seeing home prices continue to rise.
All right, thanks, Oscar. We have a question from Margaret Carrero from KNX, and she's saying that the legislature's budget analyst has said that the state's true surplus is more like $38 billion and not the $75 billion that Newsom has touted. So with that in mind, how much is this coalition seeking? And based on what we're seeing, how much new housing supply would that create? I did get a response from, unless somebody else wants to take this question, I do have a response we're asking for about 20% of the governor's proposed $8 billion in housing resources to affordable owner and occupied workforce housing.
Well, and I might just add, I think, and this sort of ties in the issue of, why is everything so rental leaning in the affordable housing space? And I think, in part, that's because we need to build these alliances. I mean, this incredible opportunity today to educate folks and to really help people start to understand the impact of the legislation when all of the money gets pushed to just affordable rental. And there's no way for these families to be able to matriculate and build a bridge out of that into a home ownership. And so I think our groups come together today to say, let's get together and rethink this allocation. Let's look at tax credits and say, how do we create a tax credit program for home ownership? How do we make sure more housing, all levels of housing, is increased and built? And we have a production problem, we have a demand problem, we have a supply problem, and we also have some, we get choked at the counter. We're trying to deal with the costs of building homes. So all of these things, if we come together and say, as a state, we are committed to home ownership, we are committed to home ownership and shifting the needle, particularly for low income and middle income folks in our state, to be able to get into the market, become homeowners, begin to build wealth, I think we can start to change the hearts and minds of the legislature and the governor and see these actions happen.
Here, here. Thanks, Maureen. That's it.
Thanks, Maureen. That's a little bit related to another question that Regina had, and that is, how will your industry and public overcome the rental-leaning views of the legislature, and how do you think that'll change the mindset?
I'll jump on that, Lotus. It's going to be difficult, Regina. That's the challenge, and I think I can thank you, Maureen. I am so excited about this coalition here and the efforts between all of us to change this dynamic and, frankly, educate the members of the legislature to understand the value and importance of ownership. It's not going to be easy, and so that's the task ahead of us, and today's the launch. So you got to check back with us, Regina, and see how successful we are after the budget session.
I think also statistically, speaking of the same type of subject, there's most people that are renting and tenants we talk to have a high desire. Over 90% of tenants have a desire to own something, right? So the reality is they're well aware of the ladder that Maureen was talking about and Michael was talking about, and how this is a crucial first step to get some kind of a pathway where they can actually stop being tenants. So the focus has got to be addressing that issue as well, because their desire, their constituents, the voting constituents in California largely want to own something and get out of that rental world.
And one of the things that we see in Habitat across all of California is we build these homes and we have, let's say, 20 homes, 30 homes, 100 homes. We have thousands of applicants. and over 50% of them eligible who are ready to become these homeowners. And so it's just, again, it's such an important, sort of mobilizing moment for us, I think, as a community, as allies, to come together and begin to reach out to our thousands of realtors, to our thousands of builders, to our thousands of homeowners, to our thousands of habitat supporters, and say, help us bring this message forward and change policy, because when we put the money in place, the action will happen, the change will happen.
Great. Let's hope that does happen. All right. Any other questions, reporter questions? Just use the raise your hand on the Zoom, or feel free to type it into the chat. Let's see. Okay, here we have one from Jeff Collins. Can you explain what you mean by parity in funding for construction with homeownership housing? Is this another way of saying equal funding for rental affordable housing and ownership housing?
I guess what I'll say is we'll be happy with 20%. We really are not trying to make a big grab here for all of the resources to go into homeownership, but we do need to find ways to get people into homeownership. And so for us at Habitat California and many of our colleagues who are doing affordable home development, and our private developers who are partnering with us to build housing and to make some of the housing they're building affordable, the resources to continue to make that funding stack work and to put these into production is critical. And so I think that's where the parity comes in. So we say, hey, let's get 20% of all of the resources in California that are put for affordable housing and put it into home ownership. Let's try that for a decade and see what our outcomes are. I think we'll see a tremendous amount of impact, and we'll be having a conference like this to celebrate our success.
Hear, hear.
All right. I believe Regina has a question, and Regina, we can unmute her.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, I'm multitasking because the governor also, as you know, is going on right now to talk about the affordable housing package. So are you basically saying, you know what, put the same kind of investment that you're doing in celebrating in affordable housing into what you guys are talking about, which I'm assuming is like the 200, 300,000. I don't even know if that's ever a real number again in California. Is that what you're talking about? Like trying to push people into that, like have that kind of ratio of housing options?
I think the primary goal, Regina, is to create more opportunities for ownership. Don't you wish prices were 200, 300,000? That's what it was a decade ago. It's not now, but with more supply. And I think I speak for my membership, which is we just want to build more product, right? And hopefully with more supply, those prices can get down to those levels. But the idea here is to engage with the legislature to have them think a little more about ownership. Maureen's exactly right. 20% is a good start. And let's do that for a decade and see, instead of always affordable rental, let's have affordable housing ownership.
All right, great. And if there are no more questions, we will close this out. Raise your hand if you have another question. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and close this out. All right, seeing none other, thank you for joining us again this morning. And if you have any follow-up, we'll be sending out a press release shortly after this. And feel free to follow up with us if you have any other questions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you guys.